We're talking about how to negotiate the sale of your business. Whether you're in 2025 that we're in right now, 2026, the principles we're going to talk about in this video are the same principles you would use in any situation to negotiate the sale of your business. Now, we're going to cover the four distinct things that you need to know before you actually start negotiating the sale of your business and how this applies to your particular situation. The four things that we're going to cover are knowing your number, knowing your market, knowing your buyer, and then one very important thing that if you get all of those things right, most people still get this one wrong that we'll cover at the end. So stick around for that. Ryan, what's the biggest thing that you think someone should know when they're negotiating the sale of their business?
Oh boy. It's hard to kind of put a definitive like this is the most important, but I think the first thing that you think of when you think of selling your business is how much you want for it, and that decision is based around a lot of factors. It's possibly retirement, possibly a pride slash ego thing. So I think first thing you got to figure out is the actual physical number that you either need slash want. And need and want two different things, but also what you want and what you can realistically get are even different things most times. If you haven't been preparing for that sale or for that progression of ownership, you're probably not going to get what you think you could get, or you might be really off base because you don't understand the basis of the valuation. So, getting an education, or even better, getting valuations from external people to come in and give you an idea of what you could get is really important in this.
So you're saying knowing your number at the end of the day, knowing your number is basically what are you willing to take for the business in the event of a sale? And I think that's so many people, believe it or not, don't know that going into a potential sale scenario because they've never even imagined a sale, and all of a sudden they're being asked for the first time, or they just don't know how it works, like Ryan was saying. And I think, I've gotten this wrong in the past when I've gone to sell a business. I wasn't firm on that number. I didn't have a concrete enough idea. And worse yet, I had business partners that I hadn't gotten clear on that number with. So the one thing I would add to that, within the category of like knowing your number, is you need to know your number amongst anyone else who's a partner in the business too. You guys have to have a clear idea of what that number is.
And obviously, if you have multiple business partners, kind of having that conversation should be happening at the same time you're talking about selling. So that should go without saying. And if that isn't a conversation you are willing to have or you feel like can be had, that in itself is a conversation of what's going on here. But yeah, not only knowing the number that you want or that you need for whatever future you're looking at, also knowing realistically what you could get at that moment, because when you find that out, you may be less likely or more likely to sell if you hit a certain number. Odds are less likely because we routinely see business owners who have very fine businesses wanting well over what people would pay based on the internals of the actual business itself.
And I think that gets into the next thing that we're going to talk about too, which is knowing your market. Now, this is a really broad one. We put it that way on purpose, but there's a lot of things to go over here. When you talk about knowing your market, one of the biggest things to know is what are businesses like yours selling for at that given time. Now, this is really complicated when you're talking about a business because not every business is going to be doing the same amount of revenue or the same profit margins as you. They're not going to have the same internal setup. At the most, you're going to have something that's slightly comparable to yours at the most, but you need to still know that market so that you have frame of reference. So you know your market by looking at comparable data. There are websites that you can go on, usually behind a pay gate, or if you work with a valuation professional of some kind, there are websites you can go on to find comparable business sales in your category. So if you own a plumbing business, you can go look at businesses that have sold and how they've been valued. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this without going to one of these paid websites is just to go to listing sites like Biz Buy Sell, Businesses for Sale. Some of these more basic ones, just Google businesses for sale, you can usually filter down to the state that you live in and the industry that you're in. And you might see a couple of examples of businesses that are selling. Now, that's not going to necessarily mean that they did sell for the amount that they're listed for, but you can at least get a gauge of what the business might sell for, kind of get an idea of like how they're valuing it.
And when we say knowing your market, it means not just, what our business is selling for. It also means identifying who's buying right now. Or if you are somebody who's trying to just bang for bucket, sell to a big org like a PE firm, are they buying right now? What's the kind of broader economic market of the country that you're in or the state that you're in? Are things good? Are things bad? Should you wait a year? Knowing these effects of the economic market and your potential buyers, which is also important about your market. Are you selling to other people? Are you selling to a new person? Like, knowing your avatar buyer in your market, what are they paying on average is important, because what a private equity firm or a larger institution will pay will always be different than what an individual or say a new buyer might pay. So you really have to kind of narrow in that part of your market research as well. And of course, there's many parts of valuation going into the market as well, but we can probably do a whole episode on sub-valuation types, whether it's, whether you're you have maintenance agreements, how many do you specialize in a certain home type, how many change outs, so we're talking HVAC that we do. So all that stuff should apply to what you could realistically get and kind of what market you're looking to sell towards, because again, that open market with individuals probably a lot more friendly to your commercial or construction-based model than a PE firm. So these are all things under the market that you should be aware of.
It's a great point that you made there, and I think it really gets down to like the last point I would make about knowing your market is know what parts of a business like yours someone sees value in.
Yes.
Like Ryan mentioned maintenance agreements, or if you've got subscriptions of some kind, there are different parts of the business that people see more value in than others. So you need to understand the nuances of that and understand what someone who would want to own a business like yours sees the value in. I think one of the easiest ways to figure that out is think about why you like your business. Think about the parts that you enjoy. Think about the easy parts of the business, but also think about the hard parts, because anyone who's going to own your business, they're going to pay for it based on how much money they think it's going to make them and how easy it is for it to make them that money. So the hard parts are going to make them want to pay less, and the easy parts are going to make them want to pay more.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's actually as we both alluded to, a segue into the next point is knowing your buyer. And we kind of touched on it. Having that idea of who you want to sell to, or that, I guess I'll call it an avatar of who you want to sell, that perfect or that ideal person to purchase your business, is something you have to figure out. And we've had many different people come on this show who are, who have sold businesses, and they always say the same thing, that knowing kind of how you want to pass up your business is important, but don't rule people out just because of their background. Essentially, Patrick's come on this show, friend of the show, said he's had guys who are like, I'll never sell to a single person. And then a single person will come in and he'll be like, I like that guy a lot. Or they'll be like, I would never sell to PE. And then they meet the firm and they're like, oh, these guys are perfect. I love their vision. So, understanding your buyer and kind of getting firm on it, but also having the flexibility to say, I'm willing to talk with somebody who's a serious buyer is important, and understanding kind of how your legacy, or, the third option, how do I sell to this person in my business who maybe doesn't have the cash right now? That sort of thing is that buyer you should get clear on as well.
These are things that you need to take into account for the preparation you do for your business. If you're planning on having some huge exit to private equity, you better be building solid financial records and building solid systems and doing the things that private equity sees value in. If you're building to transfer this business down to someone in your family, maybe a child of yours or a family member, and you want to be able to hand that business down, that's a different kind of build, right? You need to be bringing that person behind the curtain a little bit, getting them, a little bit of a sample of what it looks like for that to happen. You need to make sure that this is something that they're going to want to do. And, Ryan and I have had conversations with people many times before where they thought they were going to hand it down to someone in their family, or they thought they were going to hand it down to an employee or someone already working in the business. And then it doesn't work out. And then they're left without a plan. So they didn't know their buyer. And the way that you build the business and the way that you prepare it for this sale and for the negotiation is going to look different based on who the end buyer is. What I recommend is just build it for anyone to see value in it and to be able to buy it.
If you build like you're going to sell it to a complete stranger off the street, which again, not obviously what most people think of, but in the sense of you clean up your accounting so that's all in one place and you have an accountant, or you have some systems you put into place to automate certain features, like maybe a call forwarding or maybe a auto response, just little things that kind of you clean up all your documentation. You actually, if you don't have any, you write out stuff, you make a book, you make a little manual on how things run for different parts of your business. Those sorts of things where I would say when you look at a family buyer, an internal buyer, you really don't think about, because you're like, yeah, he's been here for 30 years. He already knows the systems. He just needs the cash. Where a external buyer, they're not going to know anything unless possibly you're selling to your neighbor who also works in the same industry, which is ideal, but you're going to have to show them how the insides work. But knowing who you want to sell to and kind of having that idea and hedging that it might not work out, that's important. So you pick a buyer that you want to appeal to and you figure out what that process is. And if you go on the internal side or the family side, just for the sake of the CYA approach, make sure you have stuff happening. It doesn't matter if on the back of 4 sticky notes from 1997, you've written out all your passwords. Like, document stuff. Actually do a little bit of the prep, because if you do have to go out to market, those things will help your business valuation go up and be more valuable, because what you might be able to sell internally will not be the external price.
Yeah. And I mean, another type of buyer that you might not even be thinking about is, let's say you're a small company that's being subcontracted out by a large company, or you're doing work with them of some kind of collaboration. Maybe they want to buy you just as an expansion, and you should be strengthening that relationship and testing those waters, and figuring out how they would make that decision. That should be part of the preparation for the negotiation. Before that negotiation ever happens, you should be trying to pre-test that a little bit and understand how it would look.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we do have an entire show that we're going to do at some point about preparing for purchase and kind of that, how do I find my buyer? How do I position all the kind of the different angles? Because we talk to business owners frequently who are like, I don't know, I want to be out, but I don't know who's going to buy. And sometimes they just go to their most prolific contractor, the one that they, it's kind of like when you're looking for your car keys and the people tell you to stop looking and then you find them. That tends to be a lot of times what happens with business owners. Sometimes it's the guy they work with every day, but they forget to even think about during the sale, who's there, qualified and ready to go. So I think we have one more bonus on this sheet today, because we started with 3 and we realized there was a 4th key one that we did not say.
Told you at the beginning that there was one that we're going to talk about at the end that most people get wrong and don't think through enough before they go into negotiating their sale. That is not knowing your terms. The terms are something that people don't realize is even up for negotiation a lot of times. When we say terms, we should clarify what that means. We talked about your number earlier. Let's say your number is you need to get $1 million for this business. Now, most people, when they haven't thought enough about the terms of the negotiation, think, okay, well, if my business sells for $1 million, I get $1 million and then they have my business. Probably not. Probably you get a portion of that $1 million, and the other, the rest of it that you didn't get, you get over time, or you get in multiple payments. Maybe it's spread out over a couple months. Maybe it's spread out over a couple of years or a few years. What are the terms of that actual sale is something very important. And are you willing to stay on and help them run it? Most people don't even think of that as an option. Most people think that, okay, well, I'll just sell it and then I'll be out of the business. And you can do that. Some people will buy it under that case. But I've lost countless value in previous sales by not staying on after the fact, and only learned later how much more I probably could have gotten for the sale if I was willing to stay on and help a little bit, just, out of my own naivety. And so I think knowing those terms and knowing how to maximize that sale and just knowing what fits with your personal circumstances is something you need to get really clear on If you're not clear on it, then you're going to start getting into these conversations and maybe spend a lot of time and energy on negotiations that don't pan out and don't go anywhere because the terms weren't right in the first place.
I mean, look, if you want $1 million and somebody says, I got $1 million, here you go. Great, take it and go. Cause honestly, that's rarity enough in and of itself. But like any large purchases in life that you've ever had, whether it's a house, whether it's a car, whether it's any sort of large purchase, there's always a back and forth. There's always some sort of, but there's this, and this, I'll give you this. You have to be prepared to play ball and be flexible. It's not saying take the low ball offer, but understanding and being flexible with what you're able, where you're willing to give on and where you're willing to come to what you're not willing to give on is important. If you really want that $1 million, and you're, let's say, you could probably shave off a little bit, you can figure out a way to get that $1 million over the course of a little bit of time, whether that's seller financing and taking the interest on it, saying, okay, I'll give you it for 900 and then charging them monthly a 10%, charge them the SBA rate, and you're going to make that extra 100,000 over the time of whatever the deal is. I'd say knowing your terms and knowing your terms is just knowing where you're flexible, knowing where you're willing to kind of make amends for people. Not every buyer is going to have the cash, and almost every buyer is going to say, I'm not paying sticker.
It's knowing where you're flexible and also where you're not flexible. We have Grant, also a friend of the show, here in the comments. He said, my friend Anna once said, when I get my money, I'm gone. It's a friend of ours who was talking about if she were to sell the business. And I think there's a lot of business owners that feel that way out there. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. It probably means you're going to be able to get less for the business if you sell it under those circumstances. But if that's your goal, is to, I want to just get my money and get out, just understand that that's going to come up in the negotiations, and it's going to be a sticking point for some buyers, and it's going to be something that reduces how much some buyers see it as worth.
If you're selling and you're telling me that you want to leave, you're just gone, I'm devaluing what I'm going to give you, not because I know pretty much, this person is not going to help me. But also now you've given me the idea of, oh, they just want out. Great. I'm gonna reduce what I have because I know you're just here for a quick buck essentially, and I know you're not willing to do anything more. So let me see how low I can drag you so that I can get this at the best possible deal. I would never give that up in a negotiation. I would always try to at least give a little bit of time and not kind of play all my cards out on the table like that.
Sure. And I think the reason that Ryan says that is because as a potential buyer, a buyer hears that and they can't help but thinking and wondering, well, first, does this person just want to get off of a sinking ship? Is this a sinking ship that I'm thinking of buying? Two, if they want out so bad, is it because it's very stressful and very difficult to run this business? Maybe I need to account for that. Maybe I'm going to need to hire more people than I thought I was going to need to take this over. And I'm not going to be able to do it fully myself, or I have these other obligations that are going to prevent me from putting the amount of energy and time that I need to run it without hiring other people. And three, I think, is just, what am I going to do if something that I need that person that was running it before, what am I going to do if I need them for something and something comes up that I need answered? Maybe, some skeleton in the closet that they forgot to mention and I didn't know about, and I don't know how to handle. What am I going to do?
All the intangible questions that a buyer goes through that maybe have been alleviated, or all the objections that have been soothed during the process, you have reopened and re-aggravated them tenfold if that's the way you're treating it. I remember I dealt with an individual who was looking to offload a business that had fallen on a rough patch essentially, and they were basically, it was their way or the highway. There was no room on the price, and I was really trying to work with the seller as much as I could, and I was on a call and talking about, I was digging into his financials, and I was not getting the answers that I wanted, but I was trying to say, okay, he kept telling me later calls, fine, I'll kick the can down the road with you. But I had brought up the fact of what they had, what they were doing. And he said, look, I know this business. I know these, what I'm doing right now, it'll bring the cash flow right back. No problem. You don't got to worry. And I said, okay, they're done. He goes, no, I'm still in talks, but I know this business. I know I'll close them. And
Source, trust
instantly,
me, bro.
well, and I'm like, but you're promising this much. He goes, yeah, I know it'll be there in like 3 months. He goes, it's not there yet. So immediately when I learned that this guy has a hard price stop, is trying to scramble to get contracts, and he's giving me 2 weeks of this business, and he said absolutely nothing more. He goes, it's so simple. You'll be done by a week. And then within week 2, he said, I should be packing up and leaving for where I'm moving to. That completely, I killed it right there. I cut the conversation. The broker called me back, and even the broker was like, I have no idea where all of that came from. I'm like, yeah, that's a crazy one. And to this day, that thing is still available. And it's been almost a year and a half since I had that conversation. So just having that hard stop, almost overconfidence that it's so good, it's so easy. I'm gonna do this. You're gonna come in here, and you won't even need me. That's all well and good, but anyone who's ever dealt in small business understands that there's plenty of unknowns that pop up. So
There are. And I think with that, we've gone over a few different things here. We've talked about how to negotiate. Really, what we've talked about is best practices when you're negotiating the sale of your business. It's about knowing your number. It's about knowing your market, the nuances of your market. It's about knowing the potential buyers who could be buying your business and how to prepare for them. And it's about knowing what terms you are and are not flexible on. And I think if you are someone who's preparing to sell your business, and if you get clear on those 4 things, I think you're going to have a much more successful negotiation of the sale of your business.
Oh, for sure.
Well, if that has been something that's been valuable to you, and you think that you could maybe end up selling your business in the future and you want to learn more, continue to tune into the show. We talk about this kind of thing, every week, right around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the show. And we'll be covering other topics like this, reviewing business deals live, businesses that are listed online for sale, and talking about the nuances of them and what they may or may not be worth. And so we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.
See you.